welcome everybody to the first in a series of webinars that Ellig Group is going to be putting on, and with experts such as my guest today, Lili Gil Valletta. And it is our hope through the information that you're going to hear through many of these experts that we will really be better leaders for our employees, our consumers, our communities, and for our shareholders, our investors. Because this is really the first time that we all have a common enemy and a common experience that's pulling us together. It is what they call an invisible war. When I'm asked, when is this new normal going to come about? My reply is, there is no new normal. Nothing about today is normal and never will be again. These are unprecedented times. We can't predict the future, but we can look at where we are today, and we can look for some unbiased, unstructured, qualitative data for insights and intelligence to effectively navigate and lead. So I'm delighted to welcome my good friend, strategic business partner, and a recognized leader in cultural intelligence, Lili Gil Valletta, CEO and co-founder of CulturIntel.
Thank you so much, Janice. As you were saying, it definitely is a different era that we're all living and reacting in. And definitely today's crisis is calling for a new way to reimagine how and where we mine insight. We were able to harvest 101 million data points that the way our technology grabs this is contextually finding anywhere people are sharing and volunteering a comment digitally. So it's not just social media. As you see here, social networks is just 22%. But what's really exciting for us people leaders is the personalization and insight. I like to call it personalization at scale, which is where you can see we have very, very large data sets based on the last 30 days of discussions across generations, genders, and ethnicity, so we can really get a portrait of people's needs and context in these very difficult times that all of us are trying to navigate.
So tell us what the impact of COVID-19 has on individuals, the lives of our citizens of the US and the world.
We are looking at 4 key dimensions. When people talk about the impact of COVID-19, how is that coming to life organically as it relates to behavioral factors, psychological, economic, or social? And that is exactly the framework you're going to see as a sample of our findings.
So you're going to show us how different age groups, different generations, I should use, and male and female and ethnicity relate to how it's impacting them in these 4 quadrants. Is that right?
That is correct to that.
So you get your information from all these social networks and channels, correct?
Yes. Social media is not the only source. Imagine comments that are being added organically in newspaper sites, even blogs or topical sites, even career sites, right? Anywhere people are contextualizing the impact of COVID-19 in their own organic, volunteered, and unsolicited way. We are harvesting that and looking at patterns with our technology to see what the wisdom of the crowds are revealing so we can make better decisions as leaders.
In terms of here, you have mind over wallet. So while the economic factors, 29% of those 100 million discussions were on the economic, over 70% were about that behavioral, social, psychological impact on my life.
Yes, the economics matter, and people are fearful of what this means to their wallet or their ability to earn a living. However, the mind and the heart are really at the top of mind and taking the greatest share of voice of all discussions that have to do with the impact of COVID-19.
So this invisible war is having a huge impact on us socially, psychologically, behaviorally, as well as economically. So why don't you take us through the differences for the different generations and overall some of the aha moments that you saw?
We're gonna start with the most obvious, Janice, the economic. Highlight number 1, that social impact, or the share of voice that social impact is taking, is 3.4 times greater for millennials than it is for boomers. That is very significant. And then the other big difference I see is that for minorities like Hispanic and African Americans, the economic impact takes a greater share of voice of the context of their discussions around COVID-19 and what it means to their everyday lives. Majority of their concern has to do with the impact on their jobs and their ability to earn an income. The second dimension, when you go into the psychological impact, that big navy bar at the center for the boomers, for example, shows how they are very realist about it. They are pragmatic about it. If you think about it, it's a generation that has seen many ups and downs in the economy, wars, and other moments in time. However, look at how that changes when you get to a younger generation. Millennials and Gen Zs are 1.2 times more catastrophic. That means they're helpless. They feel like their worlds are falling apart. Maybe this is the first time they see adversity happening to the world in this capacity. Younger generations are almost like split-minded. You are either very catastrophic about it and your world is falling apart, or a third almost is in denial, like in disbelief. It sounds something like this: I think they're blowing it way out of proportion, and they are a bit dismissive about it. Now, the chart here that I also highlighted, it was worth mentioning, Hispanics, for some reason, are also in denial, and that may be important depending on the makeup of your workforce or the states where you live in. You know, places like Texas where 40% is Hispanic. You may want to keep this into consideration, because denial means maybe disbelief or lack of information.
Yeah, so as an executive search, I would look at this and say, you really do need leaders in there that know how to manage a multi-generational workforce, because you want to balance some of that negativity or that denial or lack of realism with people who have gone through many, many cycles.
So social impact, of course, it is very negative, right? Across the board. I mean, you gotta be not human not to feel the stress of the social impact that COVID-19 is having in your life. But the question is why? Why is it so negative? What's underneath when you double click on the 80%, let's say, that is negative amongst millennials? Here is a giant aha: loss of purpose. Mm-hmm. They are not feeling like their lives matter. Like, what can I do? What am I doing to bring fulfillment to the reason for being of humanity or my own self?
And so it shows that in all of us, if we're not feeling connected and we don't have a purpose in life, we're not really going to be engaged in whatever we're doing in our communities or with our employers or even in our own businesses.
What are millennials, those million of discussions that are unsolicited? What are they revealing about what millennials hoped leaders were doing more of? What do they expect of corporate and employers? 68% of it has to do with putting people first and putting your people first. So I know, Janice, you know of some companies that are already breaking through and activating this insight, but this was very telling as well for us as leaders.
You know, we'll talk about that a little bit later, but there are a number of companies that are certainly doing things to really change policies and make them appropriate for today's world. So this is very interesting.
And last, we wanted to kind of wrap up all these numbers and charts for you with some key considerations, which there are many, and you probably thought of your own as you were watching, but there are three main buckets. There are things that have to do with people's personal economics. There is another bucket of people's psychological state and what is that we should do or consider. And then also this notion of social connection tied to purpose.
Economic differences between men and women, the concern, and yet the Economic Forum came out today about that, you know, women are much more disadvantaged, and it means so much for the leaders of today and the leaders of tomorrow in terms of how do we make people feel engaged, important, involved. And it's becoming harder and harder, and particularly when we're socially separated, but we will get back together. This will end, and we will be back to a new reality is what I call it, not a new normal. So thank you, Lili, and thank you to our audience.
Everyone. Stay safe and healthy.
Safe and healthy, right. Thank you all.